the smoothest drink on the market. We are live. Hello and welcome to Climate Change Roundtable, not sponsored by Arizona Arnold Palmer tea, but it is delicious. The only show that is actually promoting real climate stories instead of blaming climate change for the fire in Yosemite Park when it was a man-made fire. But joining me today is the usual crew. I'll start with you, Linnea, because instead of way away, you're across the room from me. How are you?
I'm doing great. There's a little bit of a lag, so it's kind of weird that I can hear you say your intro from 10 feet away from me, and then I have to wait a couple of seconds before it catches up on the stream. But that's how my day is going.
All right. Well, that is a tough start, honestly. And I know we're live right now. Just go to my computer if you're this far behind. It's not going to work. All right. Also joining us is Sterling Burnett, who hopefully is not having internet issues. Sterling, how's your day going?
My day's going pretty good. It's a beautiful day. We got some rain yesterday, and there's lots of stories in the news to amuse me this week. So.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited for a couple of them that was, I think, shared on Monday, the really most ridiculous one of all.
Oh, well, I guess amuse and disgust me is more, I'm mixed between the two. I'm pulled back and forth.
That's going to be a good one. And Anthony Watts back as usual. Anthony, how's the week going?
Well, so far, no one's been killed or injured, so that's good.
I mean, I'm sure somewhere, but if that's really true, nowhere anyone's been killed or injured, this is the most abnormal week of all time. So as Sterling mentioned, there are a lot of stories in the week are going on right now in the news. There's the Joe Manchin stuff with the climate legislation. There's the Yosemite Park fire. And I mean, let's just start with Yosemite because it is topical, and Linnea was going to talk about it, but she is gone because of internet issues. But yeah, so right now there's a wildfire going on at Yosemite Park. The media predictably is touting it as another example of climate change in action, except that it wasn't it wasn't a natural fire. It was man-made. So I guess you could say that if he's mad about the climate and started it, it's climate change in action. But really, this is just a ridiculous attempt of trying to push another, I can't even say weather event this time on climate change.
No, yeah. It's a matter of, and Anthony wrote about it a little bit as well as Linnea. But, wildfires take three things. They take fuel, they take a spark, and they take oxygen.
Yep.
And the federal government and state governments have woefully mismanaged the fuel load. In California and other states. They leave a lot of dead and dying trees. They don't clear brush. When they do, like in New Mexico earlier this year, rather than pre-treatment, they try and set these managed fires to clear brush, and then they get out of hand. It caused the largest wildfire in New Mexico this year was caused by the government setting a fire.
Just like the worst pandemic of modern time was caused by the government.
and then Yosemite, don't get us banned now. And then Yosemite, look, there was no lightning strike.
Yep.
What they know is humans caused it. And it's burning as bad as it is. It's burning out of control. They didn't put it out immediately because lots and lots of fuel. And that's on environmentalists. That's not, climate change didn't cause all this fuel load. Humans did.
Yeah.
And yet they try and blame it on climate change.
Yeah, I think this actually does reveal a very interesting, I guess I'll say, paradigm between, I'll say, radical environmentalists and just realists in general. And it's that radical environmentalists have this one-size-fits-all, don't touch the environment approach, like hands off. But in this case, hands off means let all this brush build up, dry out, and create what's essentially a ticking time bomb for a wildfire. I mean, you said with that controlled burn turned into the biggest one going on, and that's what's happening right now.
I think I believe it was Tom Hayden who once said in one of his books, let nature take its course. When nature takes its course, big, huge wildfires are the result.
Yeah.
The Native Americans set fires. They also, they didn't commercially log, but they also cut timber. They managed brush. Why? They were trying to manage wildlife, right? They wanted abundant wildlife, and they don't do well in unmanaged forests, which grow up, age, leave no light for undergrowth. So they managed forests. We used to manage forests. I don't know when the last time I saw a Smokey the Bear commercial saying only you can prevent forest fires. When I grew up, they were pretty common.
I didn't know that was a thing.
And in fact, we used to shut down wildfires immediately wherever they were, because we had roads going into the forest. We pulled those out. We used to log a lot because the Forest Service was set up as the Department of Agriculture to provide timber for U.S. Economic growth.
Mm-hmm.
And we stopped that. And the result is we've got overgrown forest that every time someone sparks a blaze or the lightning strikes, either way, fires start and we can't put them out.
Yeah. Linnea, I see you're muted. I don't know if you're totally working yet, but I know you wrote on this issue and specifically wrote about a specific environmentalist group that is acting to prevent forest upkeep. Do you want to just go into that a little bit?
Yeah, there's a couple of them. Hopefully you can hear me. It's working okay.
Yep, everything's working.
Moved over to your desk. So there are a handful of groups that are essentially bringing up a lawsuit against Yosemite Park,
Mm-hmm.
or at least the National Park Service. And they're saying that they don't want the Park Service to go forward with plans to clear out some of the dead brush and cut down some dead trees and all of that. And their argument is actually astonishing to me, and I have it quoted there. But they say that dead tree density is irrelevant to wildfire proliferation.
Literally does nothing.
And I can't imagine
that makes
why.
me want to scream, "You're irrelevant!"
I mean, look, you and I were talking about this yesterday, and just like, so when you're making a little campfire, do you use kindling or do you not? Because this is just a large scale example of that.
Yeah.
It's
So
common sense.
what's I guess
Stupid,
you
it
can rate
burns.
it. You can't rate it true, but it's not irrelevant.
No.
There are other factors that contribute to wildfire, but that doesn't mean that having a fuel load doesn't matter. And there are a handful of things that you need for a fire, and that's you need something to burn, the fuel source. You need oxygen, and you need a spark of some kind, an ignition source. And if you remove any one of those three things, you cannot get a fire.
Yeah. Anthony, you just sent a graph to me. I think it's related to the fire. Let me just pull that up on screen real quick.
This is something that I plotted. I was asked to speak to a bunch of people by Congressman Doug Lamoff, the 1st District of California, last summer. And this is from real data. This is from federal timber data, acres harvested versus acres burned. These are, indisputable numbers. In 1990, the spotted owl was listed as endangered. And look what happened. The amount of harvest went down and the amount of acres burned by fire went up.
Yeah.
And the spotted owl was the crowning achievement of an environmentalist in the West. And look what they did. I mean, if you want to talk about blame for wildfires, blame the environmentalist and their lack of vision and their lack of common sense. And dare I say, blame their irrelevancy in the whole big picture.
Yeah.
And the spotted owl story is really, it's both tragic and ironic as well, because not only do they put a lot of people out of work in the Pacific Northwest, when wildfires come, it now looks like a moonscape because they let nature take its course, which means they don't replant. And so federal lands look awful, but private and state lands look good or healthy again. And a different owl, the barred owl, moved into spotted owl habitat and is displacing it. And so now they're going to kill barred owls, barred, B-A-R-R-E-D, to help spotted owls. So it's like, well, hold it. Their nature is taking its course, folks. The barred owl moved in. Spotted owls can't compete because you've got a new forest management regime.
So we're not cool with clearing out brush, but we are cool with killing owls. Where we set the line is just interesting to me.
Well, that's the point, is there is no line. It's whatever environmentalists say that day.
Yeah. I mean, I can't disagree.
Well, and I found something interesting recently. There's a book that shows what the Yellowstone and the Yosemite areas looked like in the 1800s compared to the 1990s. And the tree density today is way higher than it ever was in the past. In the past, those regions were, sparsely dotted with little clusters of evergreens, and then you would have nice open plains for the animals to graze in. And that was largely in part because the Indians managed it aggressively.
They set fires aggressively in the plains, in the grasslands, because they wanted plenty of food for the buffalo. Buffalo don't do well in forests. They do well in
Right.
big blue stem, little blue stem, all sorts of wild native grasses. And so they would regularly set fires to benefit the buffalo, but that also kept the tree density down.
Yeah.
Right. But environmentalists know best.
I mean, I cannot agree with that one or pretend that I do. All right. I want to pull up the article that I kind of previewed at the beginning, the one that I find the most ridiculous of all that we're going to discuss this week. And this comes from a, let's see, where's he from? Sweden.
It's not merely ridiculous, it's ludicrous.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many words I can use to describe this.
Yeah, it's misanthropic and evil is what it is.
True. At some point, things can just get so bad, though, that I the only like response I can have is kind of laughter, even though, I mean, it's horrible. But all right, so this is a man who thinks that eating corpses could solve the global warming crisis. I like that the article calls him a mad scientist because I think that's a pretty accurate term to use here. So
he's an academic, He's not just some average guy off the street.
Yeah. So cannibalism is being proposed
schizophrenic
by a Swedish scientist as a possible way to combat the negative impacts of climate change. The researcher believes that eating human flesh from dead bodies could be the only solution to future food shortages and thinks people reluctant to try it are being selfish. Linnea, are you a selfish person? Are you willing to try human meat? You're muted.
Soylent Green.
Exactly.
I guess I am very, very selfish because I will neither eat human meat nor will I eat the bugs. So they're not going to get me doing that.
Yeah. Let's see.
They were saying,
as Anthony.
They were saying we should be eating bugs, and now they've graduated from bugs to cadavers. I mean, what
Anthony,
the hell?
Anthony's right. You know, it's shades of Soylent Green. And by the way, that was a dystopian movie. That wasn't Utopia where they were eating people. That was dystopia. Everybody acknowledged that. Now this guy is being taken seriously enough to cover his rants, his madness in newspapers, advocating that we eat human flesh. That's a taboo. It's been a taboo throughout human history. It's not that no one's ever done it in extreme situations of privation, but we ain't there.
Yeah. Also,
and
it causes
at one time, the great satirist and writer, Irish satirist and writer, Jonathan Swift wrote a book or a sort of a pamphlet called A Modest Solution. And he was talking about the Irish problem because the Irish were starving potato salmon. He says, maybe we should eat maybe they should eat, we should eat the Irish to solve the problems that people in England were complaining about. But that was satire, folks. This isn't satire. This guy's serious.
And it was quite a bit funnier than that too, Sterling, because in that essay, he proposed eating the children of peasants in order to decrease, because it had a twofold solution: decreasing the population and feeding people.
And here's someone from the elite intelligentsia once again proposing eating meat. So there you go.
You know, I think
not meat, human flesh.
To combat these people and their moronic ideas, we should probably invite them to dinner and say, we're going to have filet of human liver.
God.
All these different things. Invite them to dinner and say, come on, show up. I thought
you were going to say invite them on the program. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds great. Then you're like, oh, no, we're going to have a human meal. And I'm like, well, I'm not sure I agree with this one anymore.
Anthony, I don't know if you want to do that because I don't think you would enjoy the answer if they were like, sure.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Hey, you know what? I think the best way to combat these morons is to put them on the spotlight. Stand up to your words.
Put them on the dinner platter. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just like, but this guy's statement is
and some fava beans.
Yeah. With this guy's statement is the fringe, right? I mean, I suppose there's not a lot of people that are coming out in favor of this. I'd have to see the comments in the Independent, see what people were saying. But he is sort of the fringe of a movement that is pretty common. And I'm not talking about eating human flesh. I'm talking about making people live with privation and calling it a good thing. Mm-hmm. The Biden administration has repeatedly come out and said, well, we're doing everything we can about gas prices. But high gas prices are a good thing because it's moving us towards the transition.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, we're doing everything we can about the food crisis, about getting the shelves filled. But food crisis is a good thing because it's moving us towards the transition. The
Yep.
transition to the Great Reset, to whatever
The
green
liberal
dish
world order.
utopia they have a vision of, where people live simpler, poorer lifestyles.
Yep.
They get energy when the wind decides to blow or the sun shines. They maybe we go out and beat our clothes on rocks to keep them clean because you don't want to run. You don't want to run your washing machine, as I can tell you this week during Texas's heat, even with a modern grid when you got wind on it. They want us not to drive cars. They want, I guess it's back to the horse and buggy. But then, of course, you got to have a lot of grassland for horses. That's one of the reasons forests have retaken much of the Northeast, because we're no longer feeding horses with them. So it's crazy.
You brought up like how many people would agree with this. They actually do get to that in the article. So I'm going to go ahead and just put that on screen real quick. So of the people watching the program, 8% of the audience, and this is in Sweden, said that they would be willing to try human flesh. I'm going to be honest, that is insane.
That is way too high.
Right? Like
I don't believe that number. I think it's fabricated.
Yeah, it's or someone like
it's 8% of the people who read the article. So you've already self-selected. But my suspicion is that, or not a suspicion, if that's what's really going on in Sweden, I'm not sure I want them in the UN or in NATO or any other thing, because I don't want to be associated with these folks.
Yeah, I mean, the Swedish are a surprisingly libertarian country, and as a hardcore libertarian, I'm a fan of that. But they've got some crazies over there for sure. Also,
at least 8% of them, evidently.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't even want to think about this. I mean, first, like those 8%. Actually, I do want to think about this. Where do they think this human meat is coming from? Are these just like people that died from some disease? Never mind. There's a lot of questions that I could go into in how this is sourced, but that's not going to be a bright conversation.
Free range, as long as it's as long as it's organic, I'm not sure they'd mind.
Yeah. Well, there you go. That's the problem. Most humans don't eat organic, so
Oh man!
Look, the truth is, if all humans ate organic, there'd be a lot fewer humans, which I guess is what this guy's really about.
Yeah.
Right.
You can't feed the world. We live with organic for the vast majority of human history and modern agriculture until the 1850s. Everything was organic, and starvation was much more common. There were a lot fewer people. It was only when we got modern agriculture, which is not organic, which have inputs of fertilizers, high inputs of pesticides, GMOs, whatever you want to say, that's what provides the plenty that we're now worried about continuing to provide.
Yeah, this actually kind of goes back to my earlier point that like radical environmentalists have a very hands-off approach to things. I mean, I'm a huge supporter of GMOs. I don't think they're bad for people or anything. Even if they were, I do think people would prefer eating something that may not be as good for them versus starvation. And I don't think that's an argument that's hard to make. But I think it's kind of a similar mindset in general. Just like, oh, it's altered by humanity, bad. But when altered by humanity can mean good. I mean, would anyone...
It's
anyway.
You can't judge humanity by nature because nature doesn't have standards. Nature just is, and we're part of nature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Diane Selby has a great comment here.
Yeah,
mad human disease, mad cow disease, mad human disease. Anyone? Yeah. Well, another thing to think about.
All right, so
I think we should all start worrying when we start seeing the phrase "free range humans."
Born on the farm. Oh man, it's when they create a word for the human version of veal, which is when I hit the red button and really freak out. But all right, so let's move on because this is just insane. Also in the region, the Dutch farmers are currently protesting basically the green reforms. Linnea, I know you've been paying a lot of attention to this. Can you fill everyone in just why people are going crazy? Well, I mean, not going crazy is the wrong term. Why they rightfully are protesting?
It's wild, and you hear some of the stuff on the ground there, and there have been, the word civil war has floated quite a bit out of the Netherlands, which is crazy because this is one of the major breadbaskets of Europe, and their government recently decided that isn't good for them anymore. They're not going to do that. They have put some regulations and some mandates in place that are meant to significantly cut down on the number of farms they have, how many livestock they're allowed to produce. I saw a story of one farmer who was told by the government that he had to cull something like 95% of his herd in the next year or two in order to meet his methane pollution requirements.
That sounds like something.
And additionally, they want to stop using nitrogen fertilizers. So it's, yeah.
Ask them how that worked out in Sri Lanka, where now the prime ministers and the president's homes have burned because they stopped 2 years ago. They mandated that by law you could no longer use fertilizers, nitrogen fertilizers, because they were imported, and their crop production dropped by more than half in 1 year. Yeah, and they've had riots.
We could export the bullshit from politicians.
I know, right?
That as fertilizer.
There's so many puns I want to make here. Like,
yeah, I mean, look, the Dutch. Let's talk about that in some detail. Look, they have protested on the steps of the Parliament. They've dumped manure and sprayed liquid manure on Parliament and dumped manure at the homes of ministers. They have parked their tractors. They have parked their tractors on the highway, blocking traffic. They have parked them in front of food warehouses. The commercial fishing industry has joined and blocked the ports for hours at a time, so ferries and traffic couldn't get in and out.
Yeah.
And the government's response is making Canada's response to the truckers look a little bit tame by comparison. They started firing live rounds at these people.
Seriously?
Yeah. They fired live rounds at least one or two tractors in one city. They said, "Oh, they're trying to hit us," and so they fired live rounds, including at a 16-year-old boy. And by the way, they've got video, and no one was trying to hit anybody. So it's just the state, the minions of the state enforcing their version of climate orthodoxy. And my suspicion is, I could be wrong, that this will go the way of the French increase in the gas tax after the Yellow Vest movement, and that they'll back off on some of this stuff. I mean, look, I think Sri Lanka and now the Netherlands are really good examples for what's coming to the U.S. if we're not careful.
Yeah. It's fascinating because you look at, what an Abel and also Slay You Later, I like that username, made the comment that these countries have really high ESG scores, interestingly enough. And the United States is rated at a 50 or something. And these guys are up in the 90s. Well, who's up in the 90s? All the countries that are having continuous rolling blackouts, all the countries that are having food shortages that are the most severe, like Sri Lanka, and Ghana has one of the highest ESG scores. And their government, because they were getting huge kickbacks from the United Nations and from other organizations and multinationals, in order to go to all organic farming and to go to non-fossil fuel energy sources, they've been blacked out in their major cities, unable to charge their phones, unable to have consistent electricity of any kind, and they have like an ESG score of 98 or something. That's what the point of the ESG score is.
I mean, the ESG scores are completely politicized too. When Tesla was pulled off, I'm not a huge Tesla guy. I like Elon Musk these days, even though he pulled out of the Twitter deal, which I'm going to be honest, I was pretty pissed off about. But
he could be playing hard to get.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good negotiating tactic. He can just, I'm not going to get into stocks right now, but
let's not go down the road.
But I mean, it's all insane. And to be honest, I didn't even know that those were the countries that were leading these metrics. It's essentially,
I would wager
poverty. They want poverty. Is what
I would wager
they can get the kickbacks from the UN. That's the whole deal.
Oh yeah.
I would wonder. I won't wager, but I would wonder where North Korea's ESG score is or Cuba's ESG score.
Okay.
My suspicion is that the E part would be way high because North Korea doesn't have energy. And the technology in Cuba is, the 1950s cars. My suspicion is the E part would be way high, but maybe the S and G, although they might like the G, it's not very transparent, but by God, they can control what people do, and that's what they seem to like.
I went to Cuba a few years ago, and it's insane. It's like that country was doing 5 until they hit 1950, and then it just halts, and they've been stuck there since. Like all economic development stopped, and it's honestly a really interesting just snapshot of like what happens as a country just moves towards totalitarianism. Now, one last topic I did want to discuss this week was the World Economic Forum discussing gas prices and how the rising prices are a good thing. And this is not a new statement. We've seen Joe Biden talk about how increasing energy prices is, sure, there's a bad part to it, he'll say, but in the end, it's increasing the speed we transition to renewables or towards green reforms, green energy, all of that, which is just a very stark, I don't know, anti-human, you could say, but just insensitive is kind of the word position, in that you don't really care that lives are being destroyed by your policies because it moves you towards your political goal. So
tell that to Austria, the Netherlands, Germany, who are bringing coal back online.
Yeah, right.
Tell that to, I see no evidence China's transitioning away from either modern large-scale agriculture or coal or fossil fuels. I see no evidence that India is transitioning away. The largest emitters are transitioning away. And the ones that were at the forefront of it, look, I think one of the commenters just pointed out, Italy's government just fell.
Yeah.
To the right wing that are probably not going to embrace climate alarm. Boris Johnson is no longer the prime minister, and he came in as a conservative, but on climate matters, he did not rule as a conservative. And they're talking about, we got to have natural gas again.
Yeah. I mean, these countries went hardcore into these green movements, and, predictably, who would have thought they failed? You could say that Ludwig von Mises predicted that the USSR would fall, and that we didn't need to, go crazy against them because it was a failed economic system. I mean, it's a kind of distant connection, but it's the same thing. These policies don't work at their core. They're inherently flawed, and they can't last forever. But okay, so the World Economic Forum, they have said that moving towards green energy and then the increasing gas prices are the only way we can save democracy. I'm going to be honest, I have no idea how those two connect. I think democracy to a lot of people is just a word for good, which I disagree with. I would use the term mob rule to a degree, but I have a feeling I'm going to get a lot of pushback on that. Anthony, I don't know if you saw this, but what do you think about just the World Economic Forum coming out and saying like fossil fuels are destroying the modern democracy, and we need to move towards green energy to essentially to save society?
Well, I think it's basically the elite want to return to feudalism. The United States, in its Declaration of Independence, became this grand experiment where we threw the shackles off of all of this, centuries of rule by people that are supposedly our betters, and we ruled ourselves. And, I think that the people that are in power can't handle the fact that people have, individual will and freedom of thought and freedom of choice. I think this is about, we're important. We know what we're doing. You listen to us. That's basically what this is about. It's an ego trip.
There's not a democracy. If by democracy, you mean direct rule by the people through votes anywhere on earth. There are parliamentary systems. In the United States, we have a constitutional republic with a democratic segment. And I don't see how any of these are threatened by fossil fuels. Their continuation is threatened by fossil fuels. Now, their continuation is threatened by the idea that elites or scientific experts should dictate to us how we live our lives, be it when diseases strike or on energy systems, as if somebody in some ivory tower that doesn't live in the real world and has never farmed a bit in his life, has never had to produce energy himself, know best how to run modern societies and modern grids and how best to bring people out of poverty. No one person, no one small elite group of people know that. And that's why we have constitutional republics and parliamentary systems. They do represent people, at least the people who show up, but they also put checks on the wild swings of the mob. and the elite, or at least that's what they're designed to do.
Yeah. Go, Linnea. Yeah.
It strikes me, the stuff in the Netherlands and everything strikes me as very similar to, and also Joe Biden pointing the finger at oil companies or pointing the finger at whoever other than the government for the kind of policies and the impacts that they're having on our economy. It reminds me a lot of what the Soviet Union did to the kulaks, where they said that these farmers were wrecking the Soviet economy by not producing enough food. So they killed them all. And then everyone starved to death because they killed all the people who knew how to make the food.
What they don't like is small farmers, right? No one's going after the large conglomerates here in America. They're not trying to shut down ConAgra or other large conglomerates that own lots of land, but they're killing the small farmers. And that's what they're doing everywhere. Communism says, I was just interviewed by somebody yesterday, and they gave me a great quote. I think it was from someone at the UN who was talking about, we've got to, we can't, it's the development goals. It says private property is killing the world, and it's going to not be able to produce enough food for growing populations. We've got to collectivize this stuff. Well, I'm sorry. There's been a few places that you can look around the world where they collectivized. Even in China, they're booting small farmers off and they're collectivizing. That's the very opposite, by the way, of what Mao said when he wanted everyone to be a small farmer and kill the intelligentsia. And every place collectivization has been tried, crop failures, because the elite don't know how to farm and they don't know what it takes. And the only place on earth, the only region on earth, Western Europe and the United States primarily, that brought us plenty, that delivered food that could feed the masses, that brought food prices down. So now I can have cherries all year round. I can have strawberries. I eat better than the best king in any European capital 150, 200 years ago. I don't have to wait for seasons and ship it in wooden ships. It's on my store shelf. Well, it has been until recently under Joe Biden. The point is, private property and capitalism delivered that plenty.
Yeah,
not collectivization.
There's a really interesting, and I believe Milton Friedman was the first person to say this. If I'm wrong on that, my bad. But basically, there's no single human being on Earth who knows how to make a pencil, let alone run an entire farming system. And it's that, okay, so first you've got to mine the lead. To mine the lead, you have to create the machines that actually do that. To use those machines, you got to smelt the metal. Then you have to, create the oil that moves these goods across the globe. I mean, there's so many facets of every single sector of the economy. Everything is so complex that the idea that you could collectivize anything and not just, do it efficiently, but do it at all is laughable, frankly. And that's why, as you said, when you have these systems, they fail because no one knows how to do something as simple as create a pencil. Like as a group, we can do it. As an individual, we cannot. And I think that that's just a small scale example of why these systems always do fall apart.
The essay is I Pencil by Leonard Reed.
Okay, is that where it came from? I apologize for saying Milton Friedman. Big fan.
He probably references it.
Yeah. Anthony, you did send me a comic earlier related to something that we already discussed, but it's around the 30-minute mark, which is usually when we wrap it up. So let me go ahead and quickly show this on screen because this is kind of great. I guess this is how you can blame climate change for the Yosemite fire.
Yeah, this appeared in the Columbia Missourian newspaper, and there's a couple of things to note here because this cartoon really says a lot about the minds of the people that are in the media these days. First of all, there's the blatant blaming of climate change for the Yosemite fire, but this is a newspaper, and a newspaper is supposed to do factual reporting. They're supposed to do investigative reporting, and they didn't even lift a finger to do this before they approved this editorial cartoon. The fact of the matter is that the park manager of Yosemite came out in a story in the San Jose Mercury News 2 days before this editorial aired and said this was not caused by climate change. There was no lightning or storms in the area. This was a human-caused fire. And we are looking at this very, very carefully to try to find the culprit. This was started by humans, either by carelessness or by arson. And yet this paper jumped on the blaming climate change for the fire. and it's just ludicrous. But even worse, if you notice Yosemite Sam here, and if anyone has ever watched the Warner Brother cartoons, Looney Tunes, and seen Yosemite Sam give one of his trademark tantrums where he's jumping up and down and saying "dag nabbit" and "rackin' frackin'," and he's shooting 6 guns in the air when he does this. And they removed his 6 guns from this cartoon because it might offend somebody.
Yeah, in woke society, I caught that earlier in the week. They removed his 6 guns in woke society. You can't have the 6 guns. He'd be shooting in the air. And so they've co-opted this beloved. They've co-opted and bastardized this beloved Warner Brothers cartoon character to send a message, to send a false message. It's awful. You mentioned wrapping up.
Yeah,
I wouldn't want to wrap up before we talk about the best news of the week.
Oh, what did I? Oh, Manchin.
Yeah, the collapse or the blow up, however you want to look at it, of the Congress's environment legislation due to Joe Manchin.
Yeah, no, that's true. I can't believe I completely forgot about that. So let me just throw this up on screen here from CNN. Manchin torpedoes Democrats' hopes for passing sweeping climate action and tax hikes. That's twice that Joe Manchin has shut them down. Linnea, what are you? I mean, like, first off, great, thank God. This one was even less overbearing than the last one. But I mean, do you think Joe Manchin has been planning to vote this down the whole time? Do you have any thoughts?
Well, it's consistent with what he's voted against in the past.
Yeah.
I mean, he does a pretty good job of representing his state in terms of the, he's worried about the coal industry. He's worried about the farmers and everyone. So I think it's consistent. I wasn't surprised by this at all. Happy that he's held to his guns on it.
Yeah. Put up his quote. It's a great quote.
So this came from a not Fox News, New York Times article. Joe Manchin said, and I'll just read the whole paragraph. At the start of this week, Manchin said his top concern was the price at the pump and the need for more fossil fuels. I agree. How do we bring down the price of gasoline, he said, from the energy thing, but you can't do it unless you produce more. If there's people that don't want to produce more fossil fuels, then you get more fossil, then you got a problem. That's just reality. You got to do it. I mean, I agree. It's Elon Musk tweeted that too. We can't just expect to entirely transition away from fossil fuels.
What the head of not BlackRock, I think it was Google a couple of weeks ago, took Biden to pass for the same thing. It's like, look, this is reality. It's physics, folks. It's not wishes. It's not unicorns and rainbows. It's physics. And wishes don't make planes fly. Fossil fuel does. And Manchin gets it. And they compared him. I think it's sort of funny. They compared him to Lucy in the Charlie Brown cartoons, where Lucy says, "This time I really won't pull the football away. Go ahead and kick it." And Charlie Brown comes up to kick it, and then she pulls it, and he flips. But every time he falls for it, well, multiple times he's gone in negotiations. I think if they give him everything he wants, he'll sign off on it. But everything he wants means more production. And, they say, oh, well, they caved to him on everything. Biden even said he's considering allowing new leases in Alaska. Well, you know what? Manchin ain't Charlie Brown. Biden may consider all sorts of things until he actually starts it. You can't trust him, because as soon as Manchin realizes, as soon as he signs off on this bill, Biden will scrap all those proposals, those possible allowances of drilling in Alaska. And he just floated the idea of it to try and get Manchin to stay on board.
Are you telling me
Manchin's not a fool? Manchin's not a fool.
Yeah, no, I mean, but all politicians stick to their word, Sterling. No chance they would ever double down or double back on something they said. Here's another one from Manchin, though. On Wednesday, after data was released showing the nation's inflation rate at 9.1%, the highest in a year, Manchin said in a statement, "No matter what spending aspirations some in Congress may have, it is clear to anyone who visits a grocery store or a gas station that we cannot add any more fuel to the inflation fire." Yeah, it is. I mean, I drive 24-ish miles every day to get to work, 24 miles back. It's like bankrupting just doing anything these days, let alone exacerbating the issue with overbearing environmental regulations. It really just as simple as that. I don't have too much to say because at some point it's like common sense. I mean, it's already getting so bad that we've moved away from energy independence. We can see what's happening out there, and we'd go further in that direction. I don't think the general population wants that. I think it's obvious through
The general population doesn't. If you read any of the social media, most people say this whole pathway that we're on with the Biden administration is just absolutely nuts. And Congressman Doug Lamoff of the 1st District of California, I follow him on Twitter and also on Facebook. He made a statement the other day, basically simply saying, regarding these policies, regarding inflation, regarding energy, regarding personal freedoms, whatever, the left simply doesn't care. They don't. They do not care about any of these things. They do not care about their constituents. They care only about their agenda. And he's right.
Yeah. Well, I think even the extreme left, but what you find in polling is even Democrats are concerned, at least the majority of Democrats are concerned about high energy prices and high food prices.
Right.
When they're asked to talk about what's their top concern right now, what are they looking at going into the elections? Food and fuel top the list.
Yeah, and those are going to be the defining voting items for the upcoming election. Yeah, the 2022 midterms.
What I find most insidious about the climate change issue has always been the fact that you can use climate change as an excuse for why your climate change policies are destroying the economy. So when you have rolling blackouts in the last year or so, we've seen article after article blaming fossil fuels or blaming the weather for these rolling blackouts in California and other places. And it's all because they're trying to overload an already taxed grid with these green energy policies, wind and solar in particular, and they're just totally unstable.
Right.
But then they turn around and they say, well, the reason why we're having blackouts is because we are having wildfires because of climate change. Or, oh, we're having blackouts because we're having hurricanes because of climate change. We just have to have more green energy and then the weather will get better.
Yeah,
and then we won't have them. What?
Let me give you an
this
example.
Kind of encapsulates what you just said and the craziness of the whole green energy agenda. And that is, number one, they say through computer models and peer-reviewed papers and all of that the weather is going to get more erratic, more severe, and so forth and so on. That's their belief system. Their belief system also is we have to use more wind and solar. So tell me, why do you want to go to wind and solar when the weather that drives and powers these things gets more erratic? That's insane.
That's actually pretty funny. We're going to have more storms. We're not going to have any,
It's even worse. Look, I'm living it right now. Every day I'm watching my appliances and making sure I've got things turned off. I'm not doing certain things at certain times of day. Texas used to have abundant energy. Even with population growth, we were doing well. Why? Because we added reliable energy, coal and natural gas more recently. But then we got into the wind and solar kick. Wind, I think we have 30,000 megawatts, 30 gigawatts of nameplate wind capacity in the U.S. When ERCOT warned us this week to manage our appliances or we'd have blackouts, they were producing, I believe it was 10%, so 3,000 megawatts. We have 30 large scale, the equivalent of 30 large scale coal plants, 1,000 megawatt plants, nameplate in wind, and we've got 3 of them operating right now. Look, that's the reality. In Texas, during the summer, in the hot afternoon when people want to run everything, and at night in West Texas, that's where all these wind turbines are for the most part, and the plains, the wind doesn't blow. And it's not new. It's not suddenly it doesn't blow now because of climate change. It's never blown out there at night in the summer, in the heat of the day. And yet that's what we're relying on. And it's like, look, you don't design a modern grid based on hoping and praying the weather plays good, that Mother Nature cooperates. You design one for planning for Mother Nature not cooperating. We want reliable energy. And that's what we had, but we went away from it.
Right. The food issue is one that this kind of example applies to too. What they're going to do is they're going to ban a large portion of people's cattle. They're going to ban nitrogen fertilizers, and then when there are crop failures and continuations of, when we start having lower yields, they're going to blame it on climate change. They are going to say, well, this year was extra rainy, so we couldn't grow as many crops. Oh, we had crop failures because of drought over here. We had too cold of a spring here. And they're going to blame that on climate change in order to reinforce the very policies that are leading to the crops being less stable.
Yeah.
And of course, at the same time all this is happening, what are they doing in California? What are they doing even here? We've got big tech moving into Texas. We've got server farms that take huge amounts of energy. We want to create batteries that take huge amount of energy to create. So we're going to plug more and more demand, whether it's for electric vehicles that we're pushing or electric appliances. We got more and more demand being forced onto a grid that's less and less reliable and has less and less baseload power. That is a recipe for disaster. But as Linnea says, they'll blame that on climate change.
Yeah, it's kind of funny.
As opposed to climate change policies.
It's similar to California. They put out a statement a little while ago where they said, like, hey, everyone, please don't charge your electric vehicles from like 5 p.m. till midnight because that's, peak load time. And we just don't have the energy to support that. They're pushing electric vehicles on anyone. And then when people like get home from work and have to charge their cars, they're like, oh, wait, don't do it now. I think it's 20% of people that get an electric vehicle actually end up returning it within the first 2 weeks or something. It's a really high number. Don't quote me on that. I did the research a little while ago. But it's just another example of this whole system failing and, the media not really reporting it. But let's call it there for that week. Linnea, you got a little compliment here from Jim, who I wonder who this Jim guy is. Thank you for joining Climate Change Roundtable. I almost said Reconsidered. We're here every week at noon on Fridays, bringing you the latest stories in the news from an actual realist perspective. Follow our Facebook page at Climate Realism. Check out Climate Change Weekly from Sterling. He writes it every week. It's great. It is every week, correct, Sterling? It's weekly.
About 3 weeks a month. 3 weeks a month. 3 weeks on, 1 week off.
Outside of that, go ahead and subscribe to the page. I've got this fancy little graphic here. Please subscribe, hit the bell so you get notifications. And outside of that, we will see you all next week.